Canada is the second biggest country on Earth, with a population of 21 million people. Canada's biggest religion is Catholicism, with 10 million being Catholic. That is 1 in 4. Poutine is one of Canada's most famous dishes. It's French fries topped with cheese curds and gravy. It emerged in rural Quebec in the 1950s. Its name is likely Quebec slang for mess. And you may wonder, what is Quebec? Quebec is the largest province in Canada, with 1.5 million square kilometers. Quebec was first French but was ceded to the British in 1763 after the Seven Years' War. So there's a lot of French speakers there. The first people who came into Canada lived as hunters, gatherers, fishers, and farmers. They came from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge. When the Europeans arrived, they brought with them death and disease, but also trade and cultural change. They created strong early economic and military alliances. But the Europeans weren't the first to discover America. The Vikings came before. Well, ignore the fact that Vikings also are European, but yeah. They discovered areas we call Newfoundland and Labrador. The English, specifically an Italian, John Cabot, in 1497 mapped the east coast, claiming Newfoundland for the British. Jacques Carrera, Jacques, 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 Mr. Yak. A Frenchman explored the St. Lawrence River, naming Canada after the Iroquoian word Kanata. The French named their new land in North America New France, very original. Champlain founded Quebec City in 1608. The French later allied with Algonquin, Montagnais, and Huron, which are indigenous nations. The fur trade was key in the early days to help build the economy in North America. The British wanted in on this trade too. The Hudson Bay Company opened up and dominated fur trade in the north. Soon the British and French would battle, and in 1759 the British won at the Plains of Abraham, which ended French rule. The Quebec Act in 1774 preserved French civil law, Catholic religion, and public office rights. In America, things were heating up. The American Revolution started, and over 40,000 loyalists fled to Canada. Years later, in 1812, the United States invaded. They were repelled by the Canadian Volunteers, First Nation allies, which are indigenous people, and British troops. The Dominion of Canada was formed in 1867 from Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. Federal governments and provincial governments formed, and Canada expanded west and north. The First World War started in 1914, and over 600,000 Canadians served. Many died, but Canada proved itself in battle like Vimy Ridge in 1917. After the war, Canada grew more independent from Britain. In 1921, Agnes MacPhail became the first woman elected to Parliament. The 1930s were hard years during the Great Depression, but Canada created programs like the Unemployment Insurance and the Bank of Canada to help. The Second World War began in 1939. More than 1 million Canadians served. Canadian soldiers fought in Europe and the Pacific. Canada built tanks, ships, and airplanes to help in the war effort. Women also worked in factories and many entered the workforce for the first time. Japanese Canadians were forced from their homes and put in camps, something the government apologized for in 1988. Politics. Canada's government is a constitutional monarchy based on the system in the United Kingdom. The king is the head of state but does not govern. Parliament has two parts, the Senate and the House of Commons. Senators are chosen by the Governor General and are recommended by the Prime Minister, but members of Parliament or MPs in the House of Commons are elected by the people, what we call democracy. The Prime Minister leads the government and must keep the support of the House of Commons. The party with the second most seats becomes the opposition. Canada is divided into areas called ridings or electoral districts. Each riding elects one MP. Canada uses a voting Canada uses a voting system called first past the post. This means the candidate with the most votes wins, even if it's not more than half. Elections are usually held every 4 years, but they can happen sooner if the government loses the confidence of the House or if the Prime Minister asks for one. Food. Canadian food is shaped by its indigenous roots, French and British traditions, and immigrant influences. Some dishes are famous across the country, while others are tied to specific areas. Cucini, like I talked about earlier, is considered Canada's national dish, but Quebec is known for more foods like pea soup, pudding cremeur, or poor man's pudding. The Maritimes like famous lobster rolls, rabbit pie, and jig dinners. Montreal is known for smoked meat, sandwiches, and bagels. Overall, Canadian cuisine reflects the country's landscape, cultures, and history. Canada faces big environmental changes today. The mining industry is important to the economy, but it also causes pollution and waste. Oil sands in Alberta are major sources of rising carbon emissions. The government has set goals to cut greenhouse gases by 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030 and to reach net zero by 2050. To do this, Canada is investing in clean energy, throwing out coal and improving energy efficiency. Climate change is already affecting Canada with its wildfires, floods, and the melting Arctic ice. Over 6,000 species are at risk, including polar bears and killer whales. Indigenous people play a key role in conservation, managing about 40% of protected areas, and bringing traditional knowledge to environmental work. Pollution controls efforts have improved air and water quality, saving thousands of lives each year. At the same time, new jobs in clean energy are growing, while oil and mining faces while oil and while, while oil and mining faces major changes. Canada's path forward is to balance the economy with protecting nature, working with provinces, territories, and indigenous communities to build a sustainable future. Interesting facts. Canada was famous for war crimes. For example, in the First World War, it was said that Canadians would throw canned food to the starving Germans, and when they would ask for more, the Canadians would throw some grenades into the Germans' trench. The Canadians also did not take that many prisoners as others, so would kill the wounded enemy or just leave them to die. Canada also has some military legends, one of them being Francis Pagababo, a indigenous soldier who served during the First World War. He took part in the Battle of Ypres, Somme, Passchendaele, and Scar. He would soon become one of Canada's most decorated indigenous soldiers. It was said that he took 300,000 prisoners, was a remarkable marksman and talented scout. Flag. Canadian flag has a red maple leaf centered on a white background. On both sides it has two vertical stripes. The red represents Canada's military achievements, courage, and internal struggles, as well as warmth and enthusiasm. The white symbolizes peace, honesty, purity, and justice. The maple leaf is the most recognized symbol of Canada, representing the country's natural beauty, unity, and diversity. Its 11 points symbolizes the 10 provinces and one federal territory. That was everything for me.